Welcome to another episode of Chad's Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by Chax Training and Consulting. If you'd like your company announced during our podcast introduction, consider sponsoring our podcast transcript. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor, as well as director of training solutions and principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I'm director of media productions here at Chax Training and Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists. In fact, every year as an accessible document specialist, or actually with any of the IAAP certifications, you have to show that you have updated or kept up to date on training and understanding of your certification. And so you have to submit, here are the conferences I've attended, here are the things I've done to increase my knowledge or maintain my understanding of accessibility. So it's not just about getting the certification, which I think really lends to the credibility of the IAAP accessible document specialist certification. So if you're in, we're getting ready, I think, for that at that point for us right now. So I'm kind of gathering my conference attendances and, you know, speaking options and things, because we have to do that, right, Chad?
Yeah. And I've been kind of lacking on that. I mean, we've been speaking at a lot of events, but I've been bad about updating my information. So that I got to put that on my to-do list, right? Yes. As we speak.
But if you're interested, go over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications and check it out. It is definitely worth it. But it really, somebody asked me the other day, they said, well, when do I know if I'm ready to take the test? And I said, well, you really want to be doing this as a larger focal point of your work for probably at least a year solid before you can say, okay, I'm ready to kind of tackle this test. It's definitely something you want to be prepared for.
Well, you know, Dax, people have been asking me that for years about the Adobe exams. Oh, right. Yeah. Like people are like, people say to me all the time, how do you study for the exam? And I say, I don't. I honestly don't study for the exam. I just use the products. Right. So, and I'm not telling you should not study. I mean, I think there's value in doing so, but I think the best way you can prepare yourself is by doing the work. So,
yep.
Cool.
No, I agree. I saw you while people don't realize, but when Chad and I record these podcasts, we actually can see each other. Excuse me, we can see each other. And so I saw him pick up a new toy that we have. Both Chad and I have a new Remarkable writing tablet. And definitely I am digging mine. I really do like having it. It's been great.
Well, listen, you know, in our job, Dax, we sit in on a lot of meetings. We have a lot of conversations, and it's just a lot of info to remember, right? I mean, I know you've said to me, is like, hey, Chad, remember when we talked about this? I'm like, no. You know, so I you know, you and I saw this Remarkable, and we're like, wow, that seems like a nice device to just try to, like, you know, get things down on paper, digital paper, so to speak, for, you know, for later reference. So,
well, it's been nice because I learned that you can actually, there's a desktop app. And you can actually, I have, like right now, Chad, literally I have 7 Notepad note files open on my screen. And I dare not close any of them because I don't want to lose the notes I took for that meeting. I just open up a new notepad and start typing. But with the Remarkable, I have to, I need to shift my thought process and open up Remarkable on the desktop app, because then I can take notes in the Remarkable app and they'll get transferred to my tablet immediately, which is really, really great.
Yeah. Cool. So what do we have on the docket today, Dax?
We are going to talk about tables. It has been the hot topic in the Facebook group. And for those of you who don't know, we have a Facebook group called PDF Accessibility. We are the largest and I think only PDF Accessibility Facebook group. And we have over 3,100 members, which is just amazing.
It really is.
So amazed at it. But anyway, we also started recently a live chat where if people don't want to post something, but they just want to ask a quick question or get interaction, people can post in the chat. And somebody's been, they've a lot of different topics lately, but someone asked about blank cells. It says, can you have blank cells in a table? What about comparing two products with features in a row? And then there's a character in each cell that shows what each product has. We call those measles charts, where it's like features that have a checkbox or a circle, and one has one and one does not. And so, how do you handle that? And someone said, I was told no blank cells. And you and I know that that's not really quite the truth.
Well, and that's a really common thing that I hear from people, right? That they say, I was told no blank cells in a table, and I'm not sure where they're getting that guidance from. But I know one of the things that I say is that blank cells are okay for sighted users. They're also okay for non-sighted users, right?
Well, it didn't always used to be that way, though, Chad. And here's where that thing came from. The no blank cells came from JAWS and NVDA, and they used to not read blank cells correctly. What would happen was that the column header would, if I remember right, the column header would change, but there would be a syncing. It would get out of sync. I'm going to say that again. So what would happen is that the column header is obviously the header for that column, but when it encountered a blank cell, that association would get out of sync, and now the wrong column header was being voiced for the wrong table data.
Oh, okay.
And so it used to be a problem. And so the answer was no blank cells, because it didn't understand how to process the fact that there wasn't a cell there. Right. And so as assistive technology has improved, it's no longer an issue. And when you're in a column and there's a blank cell, it moves past that column and jumps you to the next. And some people don't like that. Some people say, I want to know, I want to hear, because I'm following in my brain every column. I'm in column 2, now I'm in column 3, and I'm in column 4. But if I went from column 2 to column 4, you might go, well, what the heck happened to column 3? Well, there was no data in that cell, so it just moved. And some people don't like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's where you get it.
I could totally see how you could get lost in the table.
Right.
Right. I mean, you and I talk about that a lot. There's situations like when you have a table and a cell has a ton of text in it.
Yep.
Right. I think that's a great example where like you can almost get lost in the table fairly quickly because, you're reading and you're reading text and then you almost forget that you're in a table.
Sure.
And then you're like, okay, where do I go from here? So,
well, we've seen like bullet lists on the table, right in the table cell, which is fine. I remember when I used to say, no, you can't have bullet lists on the table, right? I mean, we grow, right? I want everyone listening to hear me when I say this. What you know now is not what you will know in 6 months from now.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we are always increasing our knowledge. In fact, we have I really have changed my thinking really as of late, Chad, because I was answering someone's question about blank header cells and can you have a blank header cell? And one of our members mentioned, well, no, yeah, you can have a blank header cell. It's just fine. And I thought, no, you can't. And I went and I was getting ready to kind of write a rebuttal. And like I always do, I go and do the research. I try to anyway, go and do the research to back up what I'm about to say, because I want to make sure that I'm saying the right thing. And I went to the WCAG principles for guidance on tables. And in fact, the W3C has a tables tutorial. So if you go to w3.org/WAI/tutorials/tables, you can get to the tables tutorial, or you can join our Facebook group and follow the post, because we did a post on it.
Yeah.
But this tables tutorial very clearly shows two examples where that first A1 cell is blank. And then in the next thing, which is the H1, excuse me, it's H51 is the technique. So in the WCAG, there are these technique examples. I don't know if most people know they're there, Chad. They have these technique examples where it shows you, here's how you do this in PDF. And there's 22 PDF examples, but there's also a bajillion, that's the official number, a bajillion. There's a bajillion HTML examples as well. And in the HTML example for using table markup to present tabular information, you could just Google that. It's H51. It shows you very clearly the table structure where the H1 cell is, the A1 cell is blank. So I think I've changed my mind.
Well, but let's be clear, Dax, right? I mean, you're talking about having a blank header cell, right? And I still think that guidance is correct, right? But I think you're talking about having a cell that's in the header position, but it's no longer tagged as a header cell.
Yeah, I mean, the nuance is visually, you would consider it in the header row, right?
Exactly.
It's in that first column. And so usually a header cell, a column header to be specific, describes the items below it. And in the first column, typically we have a series of row headers that describe the information that are in that row. And so a lot of people leave that first cell blank, and they're trying to struggle to come up with a word or a phrase that describes the things in that first column. And so a way to do it, the way we kind of said you really shouldn't do before, was to leave it blank and convert it to a TD. So it's no longer a table, it's no longer a TH, it's now a TD, and therefore doesn't require scope. It does, it's not required to be filled in, right? And I think that's what you're clarifying, that yes, table header still should never be blank, but in this case, it's not a column header, it's just a TD, right?
Right. And to be fair, I mean, when somebody enters that table using assistive technology, it's going to say table with 12 rows and 5 columns, whatever. And then when they dive into that table and they read that first cell, it is going to be blank.
Well,
right?
The truth, the clarity though there is they're not going to read the first cell. It's going to skip that first cell and go to the second column. So you're going to hear table with 12 columns and 5 rows, and then the first one you hear will be column 2, row 1, and then it will read the header. It just skips right over that first cell.
Okay, so it's even less of a barrier in that situation. So you're saying AT, right? Both
Yes,
JAWS and NVDA are going to skip that blank TD that's in the A1 position.
Well, some screen readers will announce blank. They'll just, there are older screen readers that when they get to that, it's going to say blank. So testing with a screen reader really is the most important way to validate what the user experience should be, right? And I know we were just talking about how certain screen readers will skip over those blank cells. And in fact, we just tested this and to make sure we were giving you the right guidance. And so when you read a table with a blank cell with JAWS is going to announce blank when you get to that cell. So if your very first cell in the table is blank, that A1 cell, it's going to read blank. Now, NVDA will skip over that blank cell and move directly to the first cell that has content. So you're just going to hear column 2 and whatever it is.
Yeah. And, neither one is a barrier, right? I mean, that's the behavior of each particular. I mean, as much as we want the screen readers to behave in the same way, they don't, right? And so, you just have to be aware that the experience is going to be slightly different, but neither one of them inherently is a barrier. So.
Right. Well, and that brings us to the point of what do you do with those blank cells, right? So we created this article and I made it easy for everybody to get to. It's how to handle blank cells in an accessible table. If you go to bit.ly/blank cells, you'll be able to read the article. It talks about how things are voiced when you get to blank cells or n/a or n.a or na or whatever the case may be. Go read that article. It's definitely enlightening. I wrote it quite a while ago, but it is definitely a great article to understand how blank cells are being affected.
For sure. It'll be a good read for everybody, and hopefully you'll learn something. I mean, the more you know, just the easier it is for you to address problems when they arise. This is a good segue, Dax, right? And so, as we're talking about the concept of blank cells, I mean, we've said numerous times on the podcast that blank cells in the body of the table are okay. Right. I would certainly argue that the experience could be better when it contains information, but inherently, it's not a barrier. It's not a violation. From a structural standpoint, when blank cells will kill you is when you're trying to make a table compliant. Right. And I literally just dealt with this on a project that you and I were working on where, I thought I had looked at everything and I checked it and I was getting a regularity error. And I'm like, what the heck's going on? I've got everything how it needs to be. And lo and behold, some of the rows had a blank cell as the first cell within the row. And that was just throwing everything off, So it's an important thing to keep in mind. I mean, tables can be very picky.
So I think it's important that we talk about what that means, a blank cell. Well, in the tag structure, you have your table structure, right? You've got TDs and you've got a table tag, and then you've got a TR that is your table row. And then inside each TR tag, you have TD tags. And then inside each TD tag, you have content, and that may be a paragraph or whatever. But when you have a blank cell, all you have is just the TD tag with no content in it. And that's the part that structurally makes it harder for screen readers to parse through, because there's no data. There's a container, but there's nothing in it. And go ahead.
And it still occupies space.
Yes.
Right. Like I like to say, like, a table in my mind is a big math problem, right? Like the table wants to be a perfect grid. Right. So every row has the same number of cells, and it wants to be a perfect grid. And that's why when you start merging cells, you potentially get a problem, because if I merge 3 cells in a 4-column table, now the row only has 2 cells.
Right.
And that's what often creates your regularity error, until you tell that merged cell that it needs to occupy the space of 3 cells.
Right, which is that is your column span, right?
Right. And the same applies to a row span, right? I mean, if you merge, 3 vertical cells because it applies to all 3 rows, that then needs a row span of 3 applied to it so that it all equals out in the end, right? So you still maintain that grid.
Here's a super secret tip for everyone that I use. When you have to set manually the row span or column span of a table, because you've gone into the table editor and it's all jacked up, everything looks out of whack inside Acrobat, nothing's lining up. What I'll do is I'll try to select all of them and then right click, go to properties, and set the row span and column span to 1 and 1. because then when I have to go into each one of those tags in the tags tree, that value was already there as a custom object, that it's listed. Otherwise, when you go into a table trying to do surgery to kind of make it regular, to find that one cell that's broken, you have to go into the properties, then you have to create a new set, and then you have to make a new variable that says row span or call span, and then add the value, right? But if you do it using the table editor, just set everything to 1 and 1, then those values are in there, and you can then just hit change value, modify the existing call span or row span from the 1 that you set it to whatever it is. So it's a little bit of a time saver when I know I've got a table that's just completely destroyed.
Yeah, but you and I both know too that the table editor fails very quickly.
Yes.
Right. Like sometimes when your call span or row span is not properly set, the table editor is not able to figure out what it's supposed to look like. And sometimes you're not able to select the cell you're trying to modify.
Agreed. And that's why I wish, Adobe, if you're listening to us, if you could make my one wish come true for 2023, will you give us the ability to right click on the tag in the TD in the tags tree and go to the cell properties and get to that little dialog box that pops up in the table editor? That would be so great. It would solve so many issues when I've got a table that I know that this cell is the one that is broken. I just need to set the column span or row span. I just need to get in there and set that property. Then I don't have to go into the tag and go into the tag properties and, edit it manually.
That's actually a really good request, Dax, right? Like just right click on the tag and say table cell properties.
Right.
Right. Like that's all we're asking for. Right. Yeah.
And that's all we're doing. When we go into the manual, do edit tag and then find the right variable area and add the custom line. It's really all we're doing. It's just easier in the WYSIWYG in the pop-up screen that comes up where you can just go down to, yes, this is a TH, table header, and set the row span to 5 or 3 or whatever it is,
Because to do it currently, you totally need to be an accessibility geek.
Well,
right.
Sure,
I mean, let's be real, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's brutal, right? You create a new attribute. When it creates the new attribute, it's not smart enough to know that it's a table.
Right.
So you got to change that attribute from layout to table, then add I'm not even going to go there. I'm not even going to bore everybody.
I was explaining it earlier too. And I'm sure people were like, oh, okay, I'm lost. Right. I mean, because that's really the idea, is that it's just complicated. And when we teach this in a class, everybody's eyes tend to glaze over as soon as we start going into that edit tag. So, Chad, one of the other things that we get a lot in questions is, how do I deal with a features chart? Right? It's like 2 columns. Maybe you've got product A and product B, 2 different dishwashers. And they have all the features, auto dry and programmable and self-cleaning and all of that. And you've got either checkboxes or dots in one column or another for which features these 2 products have. And how do you deal with that when you're talking about a screen reader? Because it's really just a symbol or a checkbox, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you're also assuming, Dax, that they used a font.
Oh,
right.
True.
Because that's that's why this topic is so tricky. Right. But so assuming they used a font, right? I mean, a lot of times they used wingdings, webdings, zapfdingbats, right, to create that unique character.
Yep.
And fundamentally, that character is a letter.
Right.
On your keyboard. So like if you're using zapfdingbats, the letter H could be a check mark or something like that. So realistically, though, when that table is read, it's going to say auto dry. And then it's going to go to the next comment. It's going to say H. Right.
And you're like, H what?
Like, okay. And then the next column will say Q, or something like that. Yep. So, now, there's ways of addressing that, right? I mean, you could add actual text to those characters if you want. But
Right.
that's a lot of work, right? I mean, so what I'm saying is after you make the PDF, you got to go into that chart and manually add actual text to every single character.
Well,
And
if you use the character map, though, in Windows, I don't know what it is for a Mac. If you go to Windows, to the Windows dialog box and type CHARMAP, char map, the character map opens up inside Windows and shows you, you can search for a character, or you can just click on it and it'll show you in the bottom, it'll tell you what it's going to be voiced as. So if you use the diamond symbol, if you use the kind of the squished one, it will say lozenge, or the right pointing pointer says pointer.
Yeah.
Right? We typically use these for bullets, right? But they do have a voicing for some of them. And so you can plan effectively and pick the right ones. But if you want it to say selected or present or something else, then you're absolutely right. Adding actual text to that object is the way to go. And it would be great. This is a prime example of why we wish that in InDesign you could create character styles with actual text.
Yeah.
Because then you could then go in and program that right in and set the style for it, and boom, you're done, right? And you don't have to do all this extra work.
It would be so powerful, right?
Yes.
And then, furthermore, right, another challenge we run into is the measles chart that you described, Dax, where they use a circle, right? And a lot of times, for example, in InDesign, the way they do that is they literally just draw a circle on top of the table.
Right.
Now, in a case like that, the table cell is still blank.
Yep.
That circle is not in the table cell, right? So to make that work, again, it's going to be some extra work, but you could apply actual or alternate text to that circle, and then you got to paste it into the cell. Again, you're creating a little bit of extra work for yourself, but sometimes we're doing this because we're satisfying the client's needs, or more accurately, desires, right? So is there a better solution to the problem?
Well, yeah, you could actually, what I do is I put text inside the cell that says what I want it to say, and I make it like 3-point type or 1-point type or whatever I want it to be, something small. And then I can float all my circles on top of those. I just need to make sure that my circles are big enough, or that the text is white, or whatever my background color is. And then it doesn't matter. The circles are just there for the visual. The text in the cell is there for the screen reader user. So when it gets there, it could say selected or present or, feature, or whatever I wanted to say, and those circles just float. They're artifacted, right? They're just floated over top of the table. But both are valid approaches. It just depends on which one you want to use. And I think that goes back to, we'll close out with this, is that there are so many approaches to accessibility that thinking about how you design with accessibility in mind is so important and can save you so much time, that it really is something that we should all be thinking about. What do I want the user experience to be? How can I minimize my effort but maximize my results?
Yep. And one last thing I'll say, another approach is, instead of the measles charts or the check boxes or the X's, literally put the text in the cell.
Yep.
That just says yes or no. Right. That kind of solves a ton of problems. But
true.
Again, I know a lot of times
it's not as sexy.
Yeah, it's not as beautiful, it's not as designed, but it's very effective. All right, guys. Well, listen, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to listen to us this week. I hope you found our discussion valuable, and you learned a lot about table structure and when blank cells in a heading are okay, and yeah, just a really good discussion. Thanks for having it, Dax.
No, absolutely. And we want to let our listeners know that we are going to be at CSUN coming up. That is our next conference, right, Chad?
Absolutely. That's in March.
Yep.
So in about a month, we're going to be out in Anaheim, California for the CSUN conference. And we are sponsors this year, Dax. Right?
Yes,
so
we are. Well, we're exhibitors.
We're exhibitors, but we will have a booth there. So if you're coming to CSUN, come say hi, right? We'd love to hear from you and love to chat with you while we're there.
Well, and also, Chad, our listeners don't know, but we just found out we've been asked to be guest podcast speakers during the live podcast run by CSUN themselves. They heard our podcast, thought we were great, said, hey, would you guys be willing to come on with our host and be part of our podcast live during CSUN? So that's going to be amazing.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting. Looking forward to it.
Me too.
All right, everybody. Well, once again, we want to thank Chax Training and Consulting for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. And just remember, if you're looking for in-person or online training, or just struggling to establish an accessibility program within your organization, head on over to accessibilityunraveled.com to learn more. My name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.